Not every invasion begins with weapons. Sometimes it starts with a glance, a skipped heartbeat, a smile that was never part of the plan. On the edge of Galaxy Sector 7, 3C, the Orania species, an advanced race built on neural networks, marked Earth as a soft target. To them, human emotions were a fatal flaw. Easy to manipulate, easy to exploit, easy to conquer. So they didn't send warships. They sent a girl. Her name was Alara. Under the alias R, she lived among humans. She learned to mimic their smiles, their voices, their breathing. But to her, everything was just data, just simulation, until she met Ethan, a boy with no power, no fame, no place in human history. But he had one thing that made him the first glitch in Orania's system. His smile. It couldn't be defined by code. It couldn't be processed by logic. It couldn't be stored. It could only be felt. And that's where the story begins. An agent sent to spy. A human trying to live an ordinary life. But when they met, both worlds began to change. Her name was Alara Unit 7. A top-tier creation of the Orania species, an advanced race from the election system, where emotions were classified as critical logic errors. In their civilization, feelings were interference, emotional noise, a risk to order and evolution. So Alara was programmed to observe, not feel, to analyze, not connect, to record, never to understand. She was deployed to Earth. Specifically, a small, foggy town called Willow Creek in Oregon, a quiet neighborhood where people still smiled at strangers and morning mist hung like silk across the trees. Her cover identity, Ara Miles, a foreign exchange student studying biology at the local community college. Slim build, wavy brown hair, cool gray eyes, just enough to blend in, not too special, not too invisible. Her mission, monitor human emotion, log behavior, identify psychological weaknesses, and if necessary, activate the beacon for planetary takeover. Every day, Ara walked to school, jotting notes in her journal, which was actually a disguised data capture device. She didn't eat, only pretended, didn't sleep, just charged. She didn't feel anything. Everything ran exactly as programmed. Until one rainy afternoon. She stood outside her apartment, shielding her books under a coat when a voice spoke behind her. Need an umbrella? She turned. A tall guy, messy hair, smile breaking through the clouds. He held out a silver-blue umbrella, his eyes uncalculated. Pure, I'm Ethan. I live in 3B, you. Ara, she replied, brief, efficient. Nice name, he said, smiling. Does it mean anything? Biological interface almost slipped out. Instead, she said softly, I'm not sure. He laughed again. Not to charm, not to manipulate, just because he felt like it. And in that moment, something glitched. Her core temperature rose by 3 degrees Celsius. Her internal analyzer flickered. A warning flashed in her vision. Empathy glitch detected, rebooting firewall. But the reboot never completed. Because when Ethan smiled again and handed her a cup of hot cocoa from the nearby cafe, she felt something new. Warmth, not in the physical sense, but something that reached deeper. Beyond systems, beyond code. That night, back in her room, she stared at the replay of their encounter. The system ran the footage 100 times. Facial structure, voice tone, pupil dilation, blink intervals, nothing dangerous. No threat patterns, no manipulation detected. Only one note remained, unable to explain neural response. Further contact recommended, so she did something that wasn't in the mission protocol. The next day, she stood in the hallway at the exact time Ethan usually walked out. No rain this morning, he said, but I still needed the umbrella, she replied, hesitant, unsure why she said it. He laughed again. This time, there was no warning, no alert, just a strange sensation, as if a part of her, not the agent Alara. But Ara, the girl, wanted to see that crinkle by his eyes again when he smiled. An Orania agent was never meant to feel. Every interaction had to be recorded, analyzed, converted into data. Deviation was not allowed, but Alara, now living as Ara, was starting to drift. That evening, she returned to her room and activated her internal interface. The logs of her interactions with Ethan were processed like usual. Facial expression, highly friendly. Voice tone, mildly teasing, no threat detected. Eye contact, focused, non-aggressive. But then the final note appeared. System response irregular. Warmth detected, undefined. That word, undefined, blinked like a blade slicing through her otherwise flawless program. Alara reopened the footage. Ethan's face. He smiled, tilted his head, and asked, "Do you usually sit alone at the bookstore, or are you waiting for someone?" She had answered just to end the conversation at the time. But now, paused on that frame, she saw something in his eyes, something too real, too human. A prompt surfaced. Emotional loop detected. End memory stream? She didn't respond. The frozen image hung in her neural network like a question without a language, as if her system was searching for a definition her species never invented. The next morning, Ara walked the back alley behind her building. The same place Ethan often worked on his motorbike. She let her notebook drop on purpose. He picked it up. "Didn't think you were the forgetful type," he said. "Maybe my memory isn't as perfect as I thought," she replied. He looked at her a little longer than usual. But this time he didn't smile, didn't speak, just crouched and kept working on the brake lever, his face smudged with oil, sweat beading along his forehead. And for the first time, Alara felt something not listed in any mission protocol. She felt care. Not the kind you log, not the kind you calculate, but the instinct to reach out and wipe the dirt from his cheek. An impulse. Human. That night, during her scheduled connection to the mother system, a fault occurred. The sync failed. There was a delay in her data stream. The source, emotional interference. And Orania was never late. She tried to reset, but the system wouldn't allow a full reboot. Inside her data logs, where only temperature, coordinates, and visual input once existed, a new file had appeared. File name, Ethan, not numbers, a living archive, his laugh, his voice, the crease of his brow, and a sensation with no name. She tried to delete it. The system refused. The data was locked by emotion. From that day on, Ara didn't just observe the town. She started observing herself. She noticed she smiled when Ethan texted, noticed her thoughts wandered when she saw couples holding hands in the park, and she dreamed. Orania don't dream. Their neural systems don't have REM cycles, but she dreamed of Ethan listening to her sing in a room full of books, sunlight pouring through a tiny window, and in the dream, she wasn't Alara. She was just a girl, not a device. The next day, Ethan invited her to the town fair. Just some booths, water gun games, apple pie, but he said, "I think you need to learn how to smile, not to survive, to live." A warning flickered in her mind. Emotional bond with human exceeding safe threshold. But she didn't say no, didn't understand why, she just wanted to try. At the end of the night, they sat by the lake. Lanterns floated on the water like stars fallen from the sky. "You're different," Ethan said. "Different in a scary way?" she asked. "No, different like you're from a place where people forgot how to be sad." Ara didn't answer. He turned to her, half joking, half serious. "This might sound crazy, but even if you were an alien, I think I'd be okay with that." She looked at him, said nothing. All she knew was that something had ignited in her system. A feeling too large, too fast, and for the first time in her existence, she didn't try to shut it down. Alara once believed every human action had strategy behind it. She was trained to decode every gesture. A raised eyebrow meant suspicion. A shrug meant denial. A smile could hide something else. Nothing was ever truly natural. Everything had a purpose. But Ethan was different. He took her to the farmer's market on Saturday morning. Not because he needed anything, but because he liked the sight of red apples in wicker baskets. He liked hearing the soft chuckle of an old woman weighing carrots. He liked how morning light fell across Ara's face. And sometimes, just to say, "This pastry is amazing, you should try it," she didn't understand. Why care about taste if it didn't help you survive? But she ate it, and something strange slipped into her system. Not sweetness, but sharing. That afternoon, he brought her to an outdoor concert. Classical music in a small park. Rows of folding chairs. Grown-ups sat still. Children ran through the grass. No ceremony, no instructions, just the sound of violins. Ethan said, "Music's not for understanding, it's for feeling." Ara, or Alara, really sat beside him, watching fingers glide over strings. There was no data field for how a cello made you feel, but her artificial heart began storing something not written in code, a memory. Later that evening, he brought her to his house, not her apartment. His home, a weathered wooden house with a porch. His mother was baking in the kitchen. His father adjusted a paper lantern by the door. She was welcomed in like she had always belonged. His mother asked, "Would you like chamomile or mint tea?" Ara hesitated. Ethan leaned over and whispered softly, "Chamomile's gentler. Like you, she chose chamomile not because she liked it, but because for the first time she wanted to agree." She sat at the dinner table, no interrogations, no suspicion, just a few small questions. "Do you live nearby? What do you study?" Then a warm smile, a refill of tea. They weren't treating her like an infiltrator. They treated her like a person. After dinner, Ethan rode her home on his tandem bike. She sat behind him. The night breeze played in her hair. Her synthetic heart trembled, not from pressure changes, but because, for the first time, she didn't want to go back to her apartment. She didn't want to reconnect to the mother's system. Didn't want to send a report. That night, Alara opened her internal journal. Instead of recording time, location, behavioral data, she wrote a single line. Some things don't belong in reports. And for the first time, she left the next page blank, not from lack of information, but because she didn't want to explain something that was meant to be felt. The next day, she followed Ethan to his repair shop. He had a regular, an old man named Joe, who refused to replace his battered motorbike. Ethan smiled and said, "I think he doesn't come to fix the bike, he just wants someone to talk to." Ara sat quietly, watching Ethan wipe grease with an old rag. None of her mission protocols taught her this. That kindness didn't need a function, it just existed. In the afternoon, light rain began to fall. They sat in the garage and played an old radio. Ethan asked, "If you could live anywhere, where would you go?" She stayed silent. She should have said her homeworld or the name of her command unit, but instead she said, "Somewhere people don't have to try to understand each other. Just being together is enough." Ethan smiled. He didn't ask anything more. That night, she lay in bed without activating her scheduled connection. She stared out the window. The light rain fell across the rooftop like earth wrapping itself in a soft blanket. In her chest, where her energy core pulsed, a gentle vibration began to spread. Not an alarm, not an error, just a quiet echo. A whisper from all the tiny things that couldn't be translated. A glance without judgment. A gesture without expectation. A rain that meant nothing, yet meant everything. And among all those sounds, for the very first time, Alara realized she wasn't just observing humans. She was becoming one of them. Alara's inner screen lit up in the middle of the night, not because of an alarm, not a weather signal, not an incoming update, but a high-priority alert from the mother's system. It said her emotional connection to the subject was exceeding the acceptable threshold. The system recommended immediate deletion of all emotional data. She stared at the alert as if it were a sentence. All she had to do was approve it, and every memory connected to Ethan would vanish. Every feeling, every image, every voice, every smile turned into a string of ones and zeros. Deleted. Gone. She closed her eyes. Inside her, a battle had begun. No weapons, no battlefield, just images of Ethan flashing before her without any command. Him wiping his hands after fixing a bike, that mischievous smile, the warm apple pie he handed her before she could even ask, his voice saying, "You don't have to understand everything. You just have to be yourself." No part of her code required storing these moments, yet she couldn't delete them. She played the last message received from the system. A flat voice mentioned Ethan, a human, as if he were a target. The suggestion was clear. Isolation recommended. Cut contact immediately. She didn't follow the order. A fail-safe protocol triggered. A countdown appeared, 12 hours. After that, all emotional data would be erased. She had half a rotation of the Earth to say goodbye. The next morning, Ethan asked her to walk. They followed a trail around the hillside where wildflowers bloomed white by the creek. He had no idea. Still the same Ethan. Kind, easygoing, completely unaware. "You've been quiet all morning," he said. "Just thinking," she answered. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, can I help?" She looked at him. She wanted to say, "You've already helped. You made a creature with no feelings want to learn what love is." But instead, she asked, "Do you believe some people aren't allowed to love?" Ethan smiled, a soft, early morning kind of smile. "Then they're wrong, because you're doing it pretty naturally." That night, the only light in her room was from the countdown. It ticked forward, every second glowing sharper in her vision. She stood there, not as an agent, but as a girl terrified of losing the one thing she had just begun to find. She opened the tracker, located Ethan. He was in the shop, cleaning his old tools. The warm glow from the lamp touched his hair. Each movement was small, ordinary, but they held something bigger than any mission could define. No more time. She opened her emergency recorder, but not for a report. She wanted to leave something, anything, in case by morning she wouldn't remember. "Ethan, if you don't see me tomorrow, please don't look for me. I'm not who you think I am. I wasn't sent here by chance. I'm part of a system, and it's coming to take back what I was never meant to keep. But if I could hold on to anything, it would be you. Your smile, your kindness, the way you made something that was never supposed to feel begin to wonder what emotion really is. I'm sorry if I forget you." She sent the message, then stood there, silent. The timer reached 0. But instead of the usual whiteout memory wipe, a new signal appeared in her mind. A question, not from the system. It felt internal. Do you want to protect this memory? She didn't think. She just knew if loving him was wrong, then she chose to be wrong, and she chose to remember. The next morning, she walked to Ethan. He stood outside the bookstore, coffee in hand, worry on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I listened to your recording last night." She nodded, her voice soft as smoke. "I chose not to go back to where I came from. So who are you now? I don't know. I just know I can't lose what I've found here." Ethan didn't press her. He simply stepped closer and held her hand. For the first time, no screen appeared, no data stream, no emotional graph. Just two beings, one made of blood, one of light, standing in silence. And maybe, just maybe, for the first time, Aelara was truly alive. Ethan wasn't the type to pry. He didn't dig, didn't set traps, didn't go looking for what someone wanted to leave buried. But small things began to add up. Why Ara had no social media. Why she never let anyone touch her belongings. Why she knew too much, yet seemed clueless about things on TV. And that day at the book fair, when their hands accidentally brushed and hers touched the barcode scanner, the device flickered with a strange light. He didn't say anything, just watched and stayed silent. But a question began to form. Then came the night she fell asleep at her desk, the internal scanner still running. Ethan came in just to drape a blanket over her shoulders and saw it. The screen didn't show English, not any language he'd ever seen. Just symbols spiraling, ancient like a code from another world. At the bottom corner, a line of text blinked before disappearing. He stood there, still, then quietly stepped away. Ara woke up. She knew someone had been in the room. She didn't need sensors to tell her. She already knew Ethan had seen. She turned on the locator, but didn't have to search. He was outside, not hiding, not running. She walked out, no words, no explanations. He turned around. His eyes weren't afraid, they were sad. A quiet kind of sadness, like the ocean without wind. "So, what's your real name?" he asked. "Elara," she said softly. "And you came here to observe." She didn't speak. The answer was too obvious to say aloud. The silence between them stretched like the whole universe holding its breath. Then Ethan asked one thing, just one, and it shattered every shield she had. So, was any of it ever real? There was no system command to help her now, no manual for this. She had been trained to erase, trained to pretend, but no one ever taught her how to tell the truth when it hurt. She lifted her eyes and cried, not because her code was corrupted, not because of an alert flashing red, but because her heart, for the first time, was no longer pretending. It was telling the truth. "I didn't know what feelings were until I met you, not because of the mission, not because of data, but because you made me realize I didn't want to go back." Ethan didn't speak. He simply stepped forward, gently placed a hand on her cheek, wiping away tears that had no name. "Then stay, not for anyone else, but for yourself." That night, Ara erased every log about Ethan from the system, not to betray her mission, but to protect him. For the first time, Elara chose silence over submission. She chose heart over orders. And in that silence, in a quiet little town where people lived unaware of the ships beyond the sky, a programmed being touched something no technology could ever replicate. The truth that comes from the heart, earthy peaceful on the surface. But beyond the atmosphere, Ornia's strike fleets had begun to move. The mothership drifted outside the range of human satellites, cloaking fully activated, and from its dark heart, a signal was sent. "Target ID Elara. Activate planetary purge beacon. All emotions will be reset upon completion." She stood before the signal box. Small, cold, gleaming like a gem laced with death. One touch, and the entire world, the hill where they once sat, Ethan's warm kitchen, the bookstore, the lake, the laughter, would be reduced to ash. Touch it and this world disappears. Ethan's voice cut through the silence behind her. His breath was sharp, urgent. She spun around. "You're not supposed to be here." "Maybe not, but I need to be." He looked at her not with anger, not with hate, but with the eyes of someone who knew the truth and still chose to believe. "You're a spy, sent here to destroy this place." "I know." Elara lowered her head. "But I also know every look you gave me wasn't for the mission. It wasn't data anymore. It was human." Her hand trembled above the trigger. "If I don't do this, they'll come. Millions will die. I can't stop them unless I finish the assignment." "Then kill me first." Ethan stepped closer. She froze, because if you choose Earth just to protect me, then that's not emotion anymore. That's trust. "And if I have to die so you remember who you are, then I'm ready." A soft crack echoed inside her mind. Not a signal, not a malfunction, but the collapse of synthetic belief. A line of code broke, a command string unraveled, and something Ornia never accounted for happened. She didn't choose the mission. She chose the man standing in front of her. In a reverse motion, she tore the power core from the beacon, pulled the wire, and drove it into the ground. A burst of light shot upward like a dying star. At the same moment, the mothership received the disruption. Invasion protocol suspended. In the command center, a high commander hissed through clenched teeth. "Unit Elara has defected. Deploy the hunters." Inside the control room, Ethan and Elara stood, watching the sky change color. "You just did the impossible. They'll come for you now, I know. Do you regret it?" She looked at him, no filter, no programming, just her. "I don't know what's coming next, but I know this. If I go back and never see your smile again, then I don't want to survive." A streak of light slashed the sky above. The first hunter ship had arrived. No more time. Ethan grabbed her hand. Then we don't run, we live, and we fight not to win, but to protect what they'll never understand. Love. She was never programmed to choose. Eolara was a product of Orania, a race of precision where every action was calculated, every step engineered, every trace of emotion deleted before birth. But now she was running, not from humans, but from the ones who made her. Engines roared behind. A blue beam cut across the sky, slicing through the small town where she once lived as Ara. The familiar landscape was now a hunting ground. The scout drones made no sound, yet each time one passed overhead, her chest tightened not from fear, from pain. "They won't stop," Ethan said as they slipped through thick woods, shadow to shadow. "Then we don't need a plan," she whispered. "We need faith." On the surface, it was a battle of tech. They had cloaks. She had signal scramblers. They had retinal scans. She had misdirection code. But underneath it all, this was a flight of two souls. One built to destroy, one born to love. Ethan had once asked her, so was any of it real? Now he didn't need to ask again. Every glance, every grip of her hand, every time she looked at him in danger was her answer. They hid in an old transmission outpost, abandoned long ago by humans, forgotten by war. Ethan restored old security lines, hands steady with experience. Eolara stayed beside him, quiet, until he cut his hand on a jagged metal strip. She rushed over. No protocol, no calculation, just instinct. She pressed her hand over the wound, eyes wide, breath shaking. "I'm fine," he chuckled softly. "Don't scare me like that," she blurted, and stopped. For the first time, she named her emotion. Not an error, not a mutation. Fear, because she loved. That night, she reopened the Orania signal grid, not to report, but to record. "I am no longer a collector. I am not a traitor. I choose. I choose to stand with life, not because I was coded to protect it, but because I've felt its worth. If loving is betrayal, then let history call me the first defector, but the first to ever live." Outside, the building trembled. A tactical unit had arrived. Ethan grabbed her hand. "Do we fight?" "No, we live free." She scanned the cloaking chamber's key code, and they vanished from the map, not to strike, but to escape toward what was still human. Behind them, Orania issued a global directive. All hunter units. Expand the kill zone. Eolara is no longer an agent. She is a symbol of deviation. She must be erased. But down here, as they fled, the people Eolara had once saved. The eyes she had changed. The smiles she had learned from Ethan began to form a shield, not with weapons, but with connection, with forgiveness, with a love that never followed protocol. In a creaky wooden cabin tucked deep in the northern mountains, where no satellite dared to reach, they lived like relics lost in time. Not citizens of Earth, no longer agents of Orania. Just two souls, one made of blood, the other of code, trying to become real. Each morning, Ethan walked into the woods to gather firewood. Eolara would stand quietly on the porch, watching his silhouette fade behind the mist-covered pines. And when he returned, sweat on his neck, scratches on his arms, her heart tensed with a sensation no training ever warned her of. Not danger, but fear of losing him. That evening, as he built the fire, she sat across from him, her eyes never leaving his face. "Ethan," she said softly, "if you could choose again, would you choose not to meet me?" He didn't answer right away. He simply added another log to the fire, letting the orange glow shimmer across her cheek. "No," he finally whispered, "because you're the only thing in my life that made everything not so simple anymore." She was once a tool, collecting, processing, reporting. But now she was a student of emotion, like a child learning to speak. She learned longing when Ethan stayed out longer than usual. She learned jealousy when he laughed with a woman at the mountain market. She learned hurt when he, frustrated, once said you wouldn't understand. "You're not human," he had apologized. She didn't say a word, but when he reached for her hand, asking without asking, she held it back. Not by logic, but by instinct. One night, as wind howled through broken rafters, Ethan spoke of his mother, a woman who believed feelings were stronger than any technology. She used to say, "Love is knowing someone can hurt you and still choosing to trust them." Elara didn't fully understand, but she saw something, a memory growing like a spark in the dark. Ethan, with a cut on his palm, still fixing the water pipe because she said the room felt cold. Ethan, handwriting books every night because she said paper smelled like memory. Ethan, falling asleep by the static screen, waiting just to know she was safe. And for the first time, her heart didn't decode the signal. It wrote its own. Then it happened. A faint crack behind the cliff wall where they hit a backup signal hub flickered with unfamiliar light. Ornia's search satellite had found them. Ethan stood up fast. Elara pressed her hand to her chest. "I won't let them hurt you, and I won't let you run alone." They looked beyond the ridge, knowing they couldn't hide forever, knowing this quiet life was borrowed time. But what wasn't borrowed was something no language could define. Ethan no longer saw her as an alien, and Elara no longer saw herself as a program. They were two fragments from two worlds, stitched together not by code or fate, but by one thing neither ever thought they'd have the right to keep: the choice to stay. When either of them could have left, the Ornia central core wasn't in the sky. It hid deep inside a folded dimension. It only appeared when triggered by the root access code, and Elara was the final root. When the scanning signals reached their maximum range, when satellite light touched the mountain peak where she and Ethan were hiding, Elara knew they had no time left. There was only one way to shut it down forever, not by running, but by facing it. They arrived at the ancient gorge, a place where the gateway to Ornia's data dimension still pulsed. No guards, no weapons, just a strange silence as if space itself was holding its breath. "You wait here," she said. "No, I'm going with you." Inside, there's no air, no time, Ethan, only code and memory. Humans can't survive in there. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Then promise me you'll come back." She nodded softly, but in her eyes was something like farewell. Inside the Ornia station, there were no voices. Just streams of white code running endlessly across glowing walls. A message echoed through the stillness. "Elara 7, you have deviated from your original directive. System recommends reconfiguration." She raised her head. "No, reconfiguration is required to maintain data purity." "Purity of what?" she asked. "Of life or of obedience?" Silence. She stepped toward the central interface, a slow-spinning sphere holding all invasion protocols, locator keys, tracking systems. To destroy it, she had to delete her own source code, the line that made her Elara from the very beginning. Two options appeared on the screen: maintain connection, keep all memories; deletion failed. Sever connection, erase invasion signal; cost, fragmented memory. She placed her hand on the memory panel. Images flooded her mind like flickering old film. Ethan's smile under lantern light, his hand brushing hers by the lake. His voice saying, "If you really are from another world, I think I'd still be okay with that." Each memory glowed like firelight, and she knew what she had to do, what no other agent had ever done: choose feelings over code. She pressed the command. A beam of light tore through the system. The central core flashed, blinked, then went dark. All satellites disconnected. The invasion signal was gone permanently. But at the same time, she felt something crack inside her, like a fracture spreading across glass. When Ethan reached the cliff moments later, she stood there, still herself. But something in her eyes had changed. Not blank, just weightless. "Are you okay?" he asked, touching her shoulder gently. Elara looked at him, long and silent. "You're?" Ethan didn't answer. He smiled, softly, gently, just like the day they first met in that quiet bookstore. "I'm the one who will love you, even if you don't remember." She looked at his smile, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Not a system malfunction, not a data leak, but a real tear. Even if she didn't know why, even if she couldn't recall everything. Somewhere deep in what remained of her soul, she understood. This was worth the sacrifice. And then she smiled. Not through code, not through programming, but with a heart. Even if a piece of it had just been lost, it was traded for the freedom of two worlds. She woke up in the forest. The sky was just turning light. Thin rays of sunlight slipped through the leaves and touched her skin like a gentle hug. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and fresh sap. Birds sang. The world turned, but inside her was emptiness. No name, no destination, no guiding voice. Just a pair of shaking hands as she pushed herself up and a strange feeling deep inside. She had once loved this place, though she didn't know why. Footsteps approached from behind. She turned instinctively, not out of fear. But caution, like a reflex buried too deep in her code, a man stepped forward. His eyes weren't searching, just soft, like he already knew her. "Hi," he said. She didn't answer. Her mind was blank, the words hadn't formed yet. But her heart skipped a beat. "You don't remember anything, do you?" he asked. She nodded, slowly. He sat beside her, not too close, not too far, just close enough to share the sunlight between them. "I'm Ethan," he said, "and you used to be Ara, but names can change. The way you see the world can't." She tilted her head, looked at him. "Do I know you?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He just smiled. "We once walked through a lantern festival together. We sat by a lake. We talked about what makes someone truly human. And we made a promise that if you ever forgot me, I'd love you from the beginning again." She pressed her lips together. Her eyes began to blur. "I don't know why it hurts when you say that." Ethan closed his eyes, then opened them again. Inside those eyes was a world she couldn't remember, but somehow her heart recognized. "Maybe you don't remember me," he whispered, "but maybe you remember how you smiled when you were with me, and that's enough." She touched her chest gently. It felt warm, not from heat, not from energy, but from something alive, not something science could define. Just the feeling of truly being alive, not for mission, not for data, but for something soft and unclear and real. In the days that followed, they lived quietly in a small cabin near the forest edge, built by Ethan's hands. She relearned the names of everything. Trees, water, fire, sky, and feelings. He didn't pressure her. He didn't bring up the past. He just showed her how to choose a favorite tea, how to laugh for no reason, how to feel the rain not just with her ears, but with the memory on her skin. One time, while they were reading by the window, she looked up and asked, "If I never remember, would that make you sad?" Ethan looked at her for a long time, then shook his head. "No, because you're rewriting everything, not with code, but with your heart. And your heart, it's learning to love for the very first time. So what is there to remember?" That night, they went to the lake. The water was still like glass. Floating lanterns mirrored the night sky, like the stars had chosen to live on Earth instead. Ethan turned to her and asked, "Do you know something? The day before you forgot me, you said something I'll never forget. What was it? You said, fire never asks for the way back, it just needs a place to burn again." She smiled, a small smile. No reason, no data. Just because she wanted to, and that was when her heart, once shut down, once redefined, once broken, skipped a beat again. Not by command, not by programming, but for one reason only. Love.